Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. Today we're going over the top rogue strategies that I want to recommend to you guys for November 2022. I know it's the tail end of November. It might even be December 1st when I'm uploading this video, but we got set 19 Fighters Ambition in kind of like a weird time, so that format hasn't really been able to define itself. So these are decks that I think are going to be interesting to look at in set 19 Fighters Ambition format, at least like the very beginning of the format. And then we'll do another video for December rogue decks. Not a big deal, right? So we'll get into that in today's video. But first, if you guys are new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. Let's jump right on into the first deck, and that is set 2 Vegito. Now I know a lot of you guys are gonna think this is crazy to call this a rogue deck, because I know so many players that think this deck is like tier 1 or at least 1.5 status, and I would not like completely disagree with that off the bat. But the reason I'm putting this in the rogue tier is because I think we've had 2 or 3 Zenkai Cups now where this deck has been legal for play and has not topped, at least from what I have seen from the few Zenkai Cups. That to me is going to tell me that this deck needs a bit more tinkering, a bit more time necessary to figure it out before it can really be called a meta contender. I do, however, think this is a very, very strong deck, but one of the reasons why I think this deck still needs time to be figured out is because I have seen so many builds of this. Like, I've seen builds playing unisons, builds not playing unisons, sometimes even like 3-cost unisons or 4-cost unisons. I've seen builds that rely on different color ratios, so I think there's a lot that goes into figuring out this deck because of the vast card pool you're allowed to play within it. Now, I will let you guys know that I have a profile here from last week on the channel where I showcased my fully competitive Vegito deck list. I think that list is very good, but as an example from before, my build doesn't play any unisons. There are unisons that are good in this deck. I think SS4 Gogeta unison solid in this deck, although it might slow you down a bit too much for my liking, because you know, typically turn 2 you're going to spend playing your Z battle card SS Vegito ready when you are, which is going to search for any Vegito you need, as well as get you awakened if you're not in an aggressive matchup where your opponent's giving you a lot of life quickly. And your other energy for turn 2 might be dedicated to getting Z awakened with SSB Vegito, a new look. That's turn 2. Again, it's kind of hard for me to want to like dedicate my turn 2 to SS4 Gogeta and then you know, Z awaken the following turn, or maybe even do it in the reverse order or whatever, because turn 3 you can start playing your 8-cost Vegitos and then play one every single turn after that, which is really strong. That's why I don't play unisons in the deck, but of course there are unisons that do work out. You've got some builds even playing baby unison where you can you know, get that free senzu bean if you tap out, and this deck can tap out quite a bit for some pretty high pressure plays. So having baby, which also offers you removal, as well as again that senzu bean type of effect and Videl counterplay, that's all pretty solid. There's a lot you can do with this deck that I really like, but it's so cool to me, firstly, just how Bandai took a set 2 leader that many players really enjoyed. Like, I remember back in the set 5, set 6, set 7 days, many players still trying to make this leader work, and even though it would get sporadic support here and there, it just wasn't quite getting there. But Zenkai has been used in a really great way here to make this deck really viable. Even if it's only on a rogue level for now, it could definitely be meta given a few changes in the format, or even if people just figure out the proper builds. So again, go look at my profile if you want to see how I'm playing this deck competitively. I like my version quite a bit, but there are many ways you can build this deck, and it's looking to be really solid going into Fighters Ambition. Then we have Reboot Cell, which actually managed to win one of the more recent Zenkai Cups, and this deck is super interesting to look at as well. Reboot Cell was really solid when it came out, did pretty well at several tournaments, but then it just kind of fell off the face of the earth. And I mean, I think that has a lot to do with how powerful red became, because Cell's worst matchup is easily red. I mean, you've got the main boss monster for the deck, which has great protection in almost every other matchup, but it does virtually nothing against red because cards can't exist on the board with 0 power. So even though the boss monster in this deck can detach its own materials to keep itself around, that doesn't work against red because it minuses the power to 0, and then a card just cannot exist on the board with 0 power. That's just a brief explanation of why red is so difficult for this deck to deal with. But that might change going into Fighters Ambition, because Cell has gotten so many cool tools to play with. For example, just from my knowledge playing Cell back when it came out, a big problem for the deck was barrier removal. Now the entire color green has super easy generic barrier removal in the form of Goku Fated Rivals, and of course you compare that with the Piccolo Fated Rival to, you know, nuke unisons, make your opponent pitch more cards. That's all well and good. Then you have Kaioken Goku the Furious, which is just such an incredible tournament pack card from the recent set Dawn of the Z Legends, where you simply pay 1, make your opponent pitch a card, and it's a 15k crit. This is like a hand control player's best potential card they could even ever see for generic green, right? Like, this is such a good card, and these are both cards that are easily playable in Cell, although I guess you could say you have a low amount of Saiyans, Earthlings, and Namekians for Fate Arrival, but you could of course play Paragus Super Combo, and once you have more copies of Fate Arrival Goku as well as Kaioken the Furious, you have your Saiyans there needed to play Fate Arrivals, right? So that's not too big of a deal. Where does Cell come in though against Red? I mean, you'd probably just reduce a bit of your main Cell engine, just like we saw Jared Lopez do at that Zenkai Cup. This way, you're not as vulnerable to all the red decks, and you still just have plenty of great hand control options in your main board. Maybe this is a bit weaker in best of 3, which is what our national format is going to look like, because people can side deck things like Deborah Ritual at hand to counter hand control. But on the flip side, green hasn't really had a strong contender, neither has hand control in quite a few formats. So you might have a lot of players that don't really respect hand control at the moment, and they won't be siding cards like Deborah, and that's where a green deck can kind of swoop in and take up, take big advantage of that kind of situation. So yeah, Reboot Cell looks really cool with all the new tools. Definitely something you'll want to try out. Then we have Magenta. Magenta, I've talked about it like so many times this week, to be honest. This deck just gets better and better. Like, it's been errata to get better. Like, now you can play non-villainous cards in your deck, meaning extra cards and unisons, so you can get a bit more creative with that. But even then, there are just a lot of really good cards in the deck. Like, my favorite card in the deck is Beerus Villainous Threat, because it's essentially a vanilla, and the reason I say it's a vanilla is because it doesn't really have skills besides its keywords, but the keywords are so good. It's got Deflect, it's got Offering, which if you don't remember, when it's played, your opponent has the option of either letting you draw 2 cards or they crit 1 life. So yeah, you get the option there, and then the Villainous. So you'll play this thing for the 1 energy thanks to your Awakened Leader's ability, then your opponent has the option of the Offering, and they're still pitching a card from hand. So this card is just like super simplistic DBS in the form of like, pluses and minuses and card advantage, but it's just so solid for 1 energy that I really, really like it. What's cool too is you can play SS4 the Vermilion Sands very easily in this deck because you're charging all different colors of energy. And this card is in some ways like a baby hatch, or even better than a baby hatch, because for 1 energy you can outright stop your opponent's turn and wipe their board. You'll very easily have 4 to 5 colors in your energy by even like turn 3, turn 4 in this deck. So by using Vermilion Sands, you can wipe most of your opponent's board, get plus 5k for each of the cards warped, and then you're basically safely getting into your next turn. So yeah, Magenta might just be the real hand control deck at Nationals. I don't think it'll be the same level as Cell Surge, don't get me wrong. It's not that type of like uninteractable, and the leader has to attack to draw cards, thank goodness. So yeah, it's not gonna be quite Cell Surge level, but it might be a super solid hand control deck going into Nationals. Next up, we're talking about Launch. This one is really interesting in my opinion because Launch was looked at as we moved into Dawn of the Z Legends as one of the potentially most broken decks in the format, because the deck is just all about comboing. And besides being all about comboing, the deck also has a actually broken interaction where you can combo Launch the Pure Hearted from your drop area. Now normally when you do that, the card is sent to the warp or removed from the game, whatever. But with the Z mechanic, you can bypass that, put it into your Z energy, and once the card goes back into your drop area from a Z battle card cost or whatever you'll play off of that, you can use it again from your drop area and just keep on doing that and keep on doing that. That is actually, I would call it a broken interaction because it bypasses, the balancing point of the card and just allows you to constantly reuse the card as a resource over and over and over again. But Launch didn't really do all that much in the Dawn of the Z Legends format. I do think that Sin can take good advantage of Launch early with those huge double and triple strike crits. I think SS4 Gogeta is maybe sometimes too aggressive for Launch to deal with, even though Launch can very easily play Dirty Burst. So yeah, maybe those are some of the things that Launch was struggling with as it moved into the new Zenkai format, but I think it's still a deck worth looking at, especially if you were a dedicated Launch player, of which I know there are many of you guys. You can of course go the classic blue-red route, which is your much more defensive combo-centric route, but you're going to want to be careful of like your opponent's early aggression, right? So you might want to put more main board negates in your deck. Of course, you'll have the Dirty Burst, but you might want to find room for more maybe like Whis Coercion, even just simple stuff you can use to nullify those early double strike crits, triple strike crits, as well as the early SS4 Gogeta onslaught. But you can always go back to the good old red-green or even tricolor red-blue-green version of Launch that revolves around Piccolo Jr. Eradicator of Peace. This version of Launch can actually be quite aggressive, and maybe that's what Launch needs right now to like hang in there with the aggressive likes of Gogeta and Sin, right? Maybe that's what this deck needs to kind of both bolster its hand size without totally needing to be in the combo step, because Piccolo Jr. does draw you 2 cards. That's quite powerful. But you could also put some pressure back onto those decks and maybe make them get a little bit, you know, stumble off their game plan a little bit. Maybe that's an interesting thing to look at. But yeah, launch, I wanted to bring it up just because it was one of the most looked at leaders going into Zenkai, and it really hasn't done anything since. But maybe you guys will take it and figure out a way to use this leader to the best of its ability. And then finally, we have one of my all-time favorite leaders, Bonds of Friendship Goku, which got a surprising amount of support in set 19. I didn't really ever think that was going to happen, but here it is. I mean, we've got Goku, Power of Friendship, which is supposed to be a much more balanced version of a card like SS3 Gogeta, Thwarting the Dark Empire. So basically, it costs 3 instead of 1, which is obviously a lot more fair and balanced. But it does have the potential to attack twice, and its auto is not once per turn, so you can attack and remove 2 battle cards off the board. I guess that wasn't really the most broken thing about Gogeta, though. It wasn't like necessarily a removal. It was just the fact that it was a potential turn 1 25k double striker that also happened to have removal. But yeah, we've got the barrier blocker in the form of the Android 8. We've got the obviously the Goku here, which is a nice little boss monster. We got the Bulma, which is a new consistency piece. So the deck got a lot of new tools, but the weird thing about it is it kind of incentivizes you to play mono black, which has never really been a thing that Bonds of Friendship Goku has done in the past. But I can see why they might have designed this in this way, because as the game has, you know, gotten a bit older, we've seen many things steer towards the monocolor route, which I think kind of keeps themes in line and keeps balance or card balance and card design a bit more easy, which has its benefits and cons, don't get me wrong. But what's nice is now in this deck, you'd finally be able to play SS Vegeta Prince Strikes Back, which is the black bottom deck 1 draw 2 super combo, which a deck like this hasn't been able to play in quite some time, because again, it's been typically a two or three color deck, and you can't play those types of super combos unless you have all monocolor energy. So maybe there's something there, maybe it's something worth toying around with. I know a few players that are also like fan favorites of this leader, so yeah, something worth looking at in my opinion. But anyways, guys, again, this is more of like a theory based rogue deck video. Once set 19 Fighters Ambitions kind of fleshes itself out a bit more, we'll go back through this. We'll do a video for December. We'll talk more about the rogue decks that have kind of established themselves in the format. But anyways, let me know in the comments below what rogue decks you're playing in this format. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.